gallery view?
I'll send you a
Should
message
be-
in the
Anybody know how to
chat.
take these out of gallery view?
There's a
Can
view
we
in the
help him?
upper right corner. Yep.
Skill's having technical problems. All right, so COVID issues, we're pretty much, knock on wood. We don't have the mask mandates in. We don't have any of that stuff going on, so let's hope that continues. If you want to wear a mask, feel free. More power to you. I will probably wear a mask sometimes. I still have an elderly cancer father that I'm dealing with, so and my brother actually just got COVID after being totally vaccinated and everything, so it can happen. First thing, we're going to go through the planes real quick. Well, not real quick, but we're going to start with the Aero 780 Foxtrot Mike. We met today with the mechanics and an avionics guy. We're having trouble. Gabe actually has moved on from them, but we got another avionics guy. The G5 was having some issues, both of them, with the magnetometer or whatever. So that's being addressed. The number 2 Garmin screen is going to pot. That will be replaced. Well, it will be taken out, sent to Garmin for a refurbish, a total refurbish of that unit. The plan is, the thinking is the issue with the G5s is nothing to do with the installations of the G5s. It's actually the initial wire from the magnetometer to that location is probably getting interference of some sort. So they're going to have to go in, and that's a kind of a big job. He's going to have to take out the seats and stuff to get in there. So it's going to be down for a few days. So the plan is to take out the 430, send it to Garmin ahead of time so that we have it back when he's doing the work so that we can get everything done on the Aero. That is our hope.
Frank?
Yes,
if I
sir.
can mention something, it's Rick. I like the idea of the wing covers, but they wave in the wind really bad, and I'm actually worried they're damaging the paint because they're pretty beat up after just being on there for a week or two. So maybe somebody should just take a look at whether those wing covers are doing more harm than good, because hopefully it's just superficial, but it looked like maybe it was actually damaging the wing rather than protecting it.
Okay, we'll take a look at that. Rick mentioned the wing covers. We did have wing covers that we put on the Aero and a tail cover on the other Warrior 31669. We'll take a look at them and see if they're having any issues with the paint. If they are, we'll pull them off and go from there. Anybody have any other issues with 780 Foxtrot Mike that they want to talk about now? Okay.
We still have the headphone issue with the back of the seat.
That's a good point. We may. We'll have them check that out as well when he's got it all in pieces. Phil Irving,
Yes.
can you make a note of that?
Yeah, I will right now.
Make sure the back jacks are working on 780 Fox Mike.
Okay, back jacks. No cracks, right side. I have here right side back seat intercom plugs intermittent.
All righty.
Right side only.
Might as well check them both.
Okay. Yeah, we've already got it on the list, actually.
Okay. So that's that.
Hey, Phil,
Yeah.
I rode in the back with Rick and Dave, and what is happening is I can barely hear them, and there's no adjustment for the volume, especially when the controller's talking.
Okay,
don't
well,
need to
there's no
hear the
adjustment
controller
for the
through the back
volume
seat.
anyway, but there is a switch that allows you to isolate people in the back.
Yeah, but that we mess with all that. You just can't barely hear.
Okay. Okay. All
We'll have
right.
them, we'll have them
No.
check it out.
Okay.
All right, 781 Foxtrot Mike. Let's see. Pulling up the squawks on her. Okay, so we have some, there was some radios, VOR issues that are gonna be looked at on that one. The suction gauge issue, I think they've looked at that, and Sue probably knows better this than I do
Yeah,
on
I
that. I
got
think
some
it's
info
being, I
there.
think they're replacing the actual, Phil, you know
Yeah.
that one?
Yes, I do. The suction gauge is going to be replaced. We feel that that's bad. Now, I have a question for everybody else, though. The last few flights I did in One Fox Mike, and I talked to several other instructors who've flown in lately, and they all say that the attitude indicator is working okay now. Has anyone had a problem with the AI recently?
So Phil's, to everybody at the in-person meeting, Phil's saying, anybody have any issues with the attitude indicator on One Fox Mike
Recently, yeah.
recently? Nobody here has had any issues.
Okay, because we talked to the
Um,
mechanic, and the mechanic feels that there may have just been a particle of dust or even a particle of ice or something in there, and that it blew away and the problem solved itself. So
Okay.
Do you want to go off of that? Because he can turn the volume up in the computer.
Bandwidth is low on the internet over there, so you were sort of.
Just keep it going where you're going.
Yeah,
Just repeat it.
okay. All right, so we did One Fox Mike. The suction gauge is being replaced on that one. They think it's the suction gauge. And the, it looks like the attitude indicator seems to be working fine. All right, Two Fox Mike. We talked to the avionics guy today about Two Fox Mike and the radio issues. He cleaned up everything yesterday. So we're gonna see if that corrected the problem. If it corrected the problem, then we go forward happy. If it didn't correct the problem, then we may end up having to replace that radio anyway. So if you're flying Two Fox Mike soon, let us know. Mike's flying it tomorrow, so put it through its paces and make sure, because if we got any issues, he says you should know fairly quickly.
Okay.
And then we'll decide what to do with that one. And that one also had the issue with the ILS, correct? At East-
with the localizer only, not the glide
Localizers
slope,
only.
only the localizer. Yeah,
And was that the Garmin that had the issue or the number
yeah,
two?
it was actually both radios, both the Garmin and the other one. So it's something very weird. And it occurred at Easton. As I said, glide slope on both radios worked, but the localizer on both did not. I can't
All right, we did
figure out
We
what's.
did talk to the avionics guy this morning about that, so we'll have to see if that continues. He's gonna have to figure that out.
I tested it with the VORs when I flew it on Monday, Sunday. And both VORs work with Westminster quite nominally.
Okay,
So it may be a localizer specific issue rather than a general needle issue.
okay.
And Phil, I have to ask the obvious question. Are you sure the localizer at Easton was working right that day?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. Well, this time we called the tower right away. We asked them, is it on the air? Is it working? They said, as far as they're concerned, it's doing what it's supposed to.
Okay, okay.
But Rick, let me ask you a question. Maybe you know the answer. Does it have one localizer antenna or two?
It should have two separate antennas, but
Okay.
you know, I don't know how somebody maybe wired it up funny, but yeah.
So I
Okay.
just don't know the cause. Yeah, the first thing we did is call the tower though and ask them, and they said, yes, it's definitely on the air, and their monitor shows it's on the air and all that. So,
All right, so next we got 783 Fox Mike. 783 Fox Mike, Vicky will be happy hopefully today. The avionics guy should have swapped out that, he did. He swapped out the Garmin 430 with the refurbished Garmin 430 that we have. So whoever flies that next, hopefully you get 132.77, see if the higher frequencies will work. I hope they do. According to him, it is an issue with the box and the box going back. So that the one we pulled out is also going to go back to Garmin for total refurbishment. And then when we get that back, we will have an extra 430 available in case we have issues with any of the other 430s.
I have to issue a correction. I have an expert avionics and AMP happening to stay the night with me, and he does tell me that on those planes, they probably do share a localizer antenna.
Yeah, I
Well,
think
I'm
the
wondering
avionics
then
guy
if
might have
maybe
told us.
we
that
ought to go
today.
look and see if the antenna's been snapped off or something. You know,
That the comm antennas are separate, but a lot of times the localizer on small airplanes are shared, the antenna.
okay, then we need to check that.
So moving on, the next one is this. Yes, Dave Daywood has a question.
Might always have problem with the nose wheel shimmy.
Don't land on the nose wheel.
I go to the doctor. He says, I tell him it hurts when I do this. He says, don't do that.
It's been like this for a long time, and I really like it for my students to learn to do the landings in 3 Foxtrot Mike.
I've talked to Kirby
Yeah.
about it.
I have talked to him multiple.
I flew it this morning, had no shimmy. So I don't know if my students are doing better than your students, Dave. No offense, Katie. It's not your fault.
I was flying yesterday and
It
it
shimmied?
it shimmied a few times on land.
Okay.
I
I
didn't
mean, if
land
you're
on the
already,
front.
you know, if you tense and it lifts up a little, then
You're off
yeah,
the
you
shimmy.
don't get a shimmy.
She's
If you
doing
just
great.
relax, then you
Well,
get a shimmy.
I teach them is to
Okay.
bring the yoke back.
We'll have them look at it.
Should be
If-
resolved.
The people that were here when Mike Grady was here, and even before that, we had, at times we had shimmies that we never got rid of because it was difficult to do it. They try to fix it and then they can't fix it. The only other issue is to break down that entire front strut.
I
And,
know we
and
don't want to.
well, until it gets bad, we don't want to do that. But we will have them definitely look at it and see what he thinks. So he'll put floats on and land in the water.
Kirby did tighten some things up last time. he
Yeah.
did. So he just has to keep an eye on it. It's starting to wear and he knows he's gonna have to. order a new one.
The shimmy seemed better recently.
So the
Because he did
shim,
tighten
we're
up.
talking about the shimmy here at the in-person meeting for the Zoom folks. So we will have the 3 Fox Mike looked at for the shimmy, see what's going on with that. Hopefully we can get that fixed. Does anybody have any shimmies on 1 or 2 Fox Mike? Okay, so
One
Yeah,
and
there
two
might be
Fox
something
might
wrong.
have a heavier duty shimmy damper. And that's what he's gonna get 3 eventually when he has to.
So we may replace the shimmy dampener on 3 Fox Mike to do that.
Okay, is 2
All right.
Fox all right on that count? Because there's still a write-up in there since July on nose wheel shimmy.
Anybody
2 Fox.
flown 2 Fox Mike lately and had any shimmy issues?
Can I delete that one?
I would delete it. If it shows back up, we'll get another squawk on it.
Okay, I'll delete that. Now on the business of 3 Fox Mike, I put a note in. I left the old thing in, but put a note that the radio was swapped. So when you see a squawk, you'll see that. And it's asking if anybody has a problem, give a yell.
Yep.
And we'll delete the nose wheel shimmy on 2 Fox Mike.
Okay, moving on real quick. The Cessna 4846 Golf, which came up from St. Mary's, is down. The engine has been ordered. The engine is on its way. The engine won't get here until April. So the engine will be, we will have a new engine, but the plane's going to be down until that happens.
But once we get the engine, we go back into the break-in.
And once we get the engine, so
Used for training.
we'll be doing cross-country on that engine when we get it installed. The new Warrior 3037 Echo is flying. It has 2 issues. One they're looking at is the flaps don't retract from 40 degrees when you're on the ground. They've lubed that. I think the spring needs to be replaced on that. So Kervin is looking at that to fix it. And then the left tank, Don, is it the left tank? indicator doesn't show anything. It doesn't do anything. So they've looked at that, and it's the sensor, which is going to be replaced out. So other than that, Don, that plane's flying okay?
I can fly it.
He didn't fly it. Somebody
I
flew it.
swapped it arrow.
Okay.
I flew it and I was very impressed. It seemed to perform better than our other Warrior, just to be honest.
Okay. So it's a nice plane. I mean, and that'll give us 2 Warriors. So people are learning to fly and want to use a Warrior or the Cessnas. They have options on that. 31669er, our other Warrior. I think, oh, I got good news for everybody. The number 2 radio is on its way back. Totally refurbished. It's coming from Kansas. We got paid for it this morning. They shipped it out today. So hopefully that'll have a number 2 radio in it in the next few days, and life will be good. We'll have 2 radios.
On the new Warrior, the parking spot is pretty hard to find. Is there any chance we could get a closer spot, or that's just up to the airport, I guess?
We're trying to get a closer spot, but we'd have to evict somebody.
We asked them to put as far down on the plate as we could.
If we could get Phoenix to move that Dakota.
It was.
Or-
I talked to the airport, and they thought we wanted to keep the airplanes together. I'm like, no, we don't want to keep the airplanes together. Get us as close as you can as soon as you
Yeah, so as soon as we can get it closer to our line, we'll try to get them closer to our line.
Frank, I think it needs a fuel key too.
Okay.
Oh,
So yeah, we gotta get fuel keys probably for both of those planes. The Cessna 150s, I believe, are running fine. Any issues from anybody flying the 150s? Is anybody flying? Yeah, we're flying 150s. So that right now, those 2 are in tip-top condition.
The card from 63532, we put in the arrow, but then we took the one from 4846 that's down for a while. But a new card has been ordered for the arrow. It just takes a while to get.
Yeah, we are replacing the Arrow GPS card for the number 2.
63532 didn't have a GPS card.
Might not have, because like I said, it was raining when I did the cards the other day. So we need to bring.
Tomorrow, I'll make sure.
Yeah.
All right, so that's all on the aircraft right now. Anybody have any questions real quick on anything on the aircraft status? Yes, sir, Mr. Sachs.
To continue to watch the roads and find new roads.
Yeah, yeah, it's good. The good point. Let's make sure we tie down the planes well. Make sure everything's chalked. John Tyrell.
Yeah, if you are gonna chalk the planes, there's only one set of chalks, chalk the nose here, not the
Yeah.
names, it's a whole lot. There's some white line for the nose instead of just one of the names. Basically, the airplane will pivot around that one chalk main wheel and stress the fuselage. The way it's tied down.
John was saying that if you only have one chalk, it's best to chalk the front wheel so it doesn't spin around on one of, if you just chalk one of the mains, so. Or shimmy. All right, so we're gonna move on. We have a member who's going to go through a mishap with his Arrow up in New England. Ken, do I just share this so you can pull it up, or do you want me to?
Yeah, you can share your screen and I'll just say next slide when
Let me see if I
swap
can do
through.
that.
Make it big here and turn the volume
Can you do that?
far away, but. You might want to use the word or shut your microphone.
Yeah, all we're seeing is a blurry screen. There we go. If you could scroll up a little bit to the first slide.
You can scroll up over the slide. You can scroll up over the slide. You can scroll up over the slide. You can scroll up over the slide.
Wait a second.
All right. You ready for me to start, Frank?
Can you hear, Ken?
I just heard you now, but we're not seeing the slides on the Zoom side either. I can present if it would be easier for you. Let me, you have to give me, it says host has disabled screen sharing.
That's what happens when you give them a little power.
Yeah.
Ken, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you, Frank. It says you've disabled screen sharing.
All right, so if I hit what, just share content?
For a short while, I saw something that said deer strike, so. But it went away.
All right, let's see here.
Recording in progress.
All we see is the blurry screen right now. And somebody needs to mute themselves. Okay, test. So I'm gonna go, since we see most of the slides. Frank, if you could just move a slide up or down to give me a heads up if you're good. So I'm gonna start. So this occurred right before Thanksgiving of last year. This is, one of the flights I take, weekly just to keep the engine healthy in the plane. I actually had asked my dad to go along with me since he'd never flown in this new to us airplane. It's a 2003 Piper Arrow. So he sat in the left seat because I like to get a little bit of practice in the right seat whenever I have a passenger with me and I'm not by myself. So Frank, you can scroll down a little bit to the next slide. So this is our flight track. It was a pretty uneventful flight. We just went out over Cape Cod, checked out the boats, the weather that was moving out off the shore, that kind of stuff. And as you see, when I come back, VFR, fly the full pattern, pretty standard stuff. It's very uneventful flight up until this point, and I even let my dad fly for a little bit as I, kind of coached him through some of the stuff as a kind of pinch hitter course. And he was having fun. And then we come back. You can go to the next slide down. So, this is the airport. This is an old picture of the environment. The weather was, pretty much VFR. The winds were gusty. It was a direct crosswind, not too gusty. So just enough to come in with about 7 extra knots in your, airspeed, 5 to 7, I'd say. I didn't keep, exact notes on this one. But they did, it was variable a little bit in direction, and there's no weather on the field. So I had to listen to another field that's about 5 miles away to get weather. But I noticed when we were coming into the pattern that everybody was using 3-2. We had a plane that departed there. 3-2 lined up with what I wanted to do with a direct crosswind that was just slightly variable, about 10 degrees or so. Not a big deal. I figured I'll go ahead and land on 3-2. That turned out to be a little bit of a mistake because if I'd have landed 1-4, we'd have been nowhere near that deer. So you can go to the next slide. So the circle there indicates where I saw the deer. The red line is when I touched down. And when I say where I saw the deer, that's actually where it was roughly on the runway. It's actually a little bit off the runway when I saw it. And I always impress upon my students and did the same myself of checking on final to make sure the whole environment is clear. So I don't know, if it was hiding in the trees, in the tall grass, because that hadn't been cut recently, or if it had run out. It's really hard to say at this time, and maybe I even just missed it, You can go down to the next slide. So that frowny face there, that's, you know, where we hit the deer. So let's see, you know, I knew I wasn't going to be able to stop, because that's the first, you know, instinct I had was to slam on the brakes, but there was really no real time. My wheels had barely touched the ground. And I, you know, I had time to just basically apply power and start going around at this point. Since I was sitting on the right side, I actually saw the deer's head go beneath the tip of the right wing. And then, you know, I'd say I was maybe 10, 15 feet at the air at this point. And, you know, I'm sitting on the side of the plane and I feel a thump, and it's a very minor thump. So I'm thinking, well, maybe it hit the tire, because I saw it go under the wing. So I'm like, okay, everything's flying normally, right? So keep in mind, you know, it takes you a little bit of time to process that. Like, I'd say probably 5 seconds between the thump and me mentally catching up to what was going on happened there, that I'd actually been struck. So I was a good distance down the runway and probably at least 100 feet in the air at that point, if not more. So I'm looking at the end of that runway coming up pretty quick, and I'm already flying. And I'm thinking, there's no way I'm going to be able to stop this plane if I put it back down on the runway. Plus, I don't know what's wrong with my gear, if anything. I wasn't even thinking about the wing at this point, because it really did feel like it struck the gear. So I cleaned the plane up and I kept flying, because it was flying beautifully, and I kept going. So you go to the next slide real quick. I just wanted to give everybody here with this slide kind of a sense of the time frame that this was involved in. And so there's less than a minute here between when I was in radar coverage, out of radar coverage and back in radar coverage, according to the ADSB track. So if you go to the next slide, I'll show you the point where I actually dropped off the coverage. So that minute starts where that red dot is. So that it was very compressed. I'd say, you know, total time on the runway was like under 10 seconds, you know, if that, you know, between me touching down, applying power, and then getting up to the point where I would not consider myself anywhere near the runway anymore. You know, like I said, the plane handled beautifully throughout this. I was more concerned, you know, once I got up in the pattern and had a little bit of moment to think. I was sitting there as we flew a normal pattern. Of course, I called on the you know, CTAF and said, hey, there's deer on the runway. The plane that was waiting to take off, don't take off. It turns out he got on the taxiway, which complicated things for us a little bit later. Because I did contemplate, you know, what were my options? Could I go to Norwood, which had a tower and therefore better services in the event of, you know, I had to land with the gear, one of them failed potentially. Could I, you know, sit down on the taxiway? It's very narrow, but that would have been doable if there was a deer on the runway. Yeah, the, you know, plane took that away from me. He was sat on the taxiway instead. And I didn't feel like staying in the air any longer. Ultimately, I thought about it some, and I said, you know, I'm in the air. I don't want to be in the air too long, because I don't actually know what happened here. I just know I felt a thump. So I want to get down on the ground while the plane is flying fine before that changes. So I decided to, you know, I've landed a plane with a flat tire before on one of the mains, and that's where I thought that it had struck. And so I figured, even if it's the nose wheel, I still can land a plane with a flat tire. As long as they come down and they lock in place, then I was relatively confident that I'd be okay landing at Mansfield. So, you know, being my normal point, I put the gear down, and a lot of relief when I got 3 green. So I, you know, got on the radio. I warned everybody on CTAF, you know, to, you know, there was deer on the runway, because I, coming around on final again, I saw the deer lying on the left side of the runway this time, but it was just laying there. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to offset. It's a fairly wide runway, and I'm going to take the risk to land there. Did a very, very soft field landing, probably one of the soft fields I've ever done. You know, and I had the other airplane tell me that he saw all 3 down, so we were good there. Turns out the tire wasn't flat. We taxied off the runway and went to the fuel pump, and I thought that was that, right? Like, okay, he hit the tire, but he didn't really do any damage. I expected just to see some blood on the tire when I, you know, got to the fuel pump. So if you can go to the next slide there, Frank. Okay, this is a little bit rotated. There's 2 pictures on this slide. Just go ahead and show both of them there. if you can fit them on the screen. So this is what we found. You know, actually, it was, sorry, go back up a little bit. It's a little distorted on my screen here. This is what we saw when we got out of the thing. And believe it or not, at first, I actually missed this. I immediately rushed out of the plane once we got it down and shut down at the pump to go check the gear, because that's what I thought happened. So confirmation bias right there, right? Like I was expecting to see a problem with the gear. So I ignored everything else as I walked past it and looked at the gear, saw blood on the gear. And I'm like, okay, that's what happened. You know, the deer hit the, gear, and I'm fine. It's just a little bit of blood. Everything looks good. The airport management that came out to ask everything, if we were okay, looked at the plane, then looked at the gear and said, oh, you got some blood on your gear and everything is fine. It wasn't until we were refueling and I got to that wing and my dad kind of looked at it and goes, hey, has this hole in the wing always been there? And I'm like, what do you mean hole in the wing? And I kind of just went, what? And, the first picture on the left is the view from the top. So if you kind of look at that, and there'll be another picture later on, and I can, send these out. It's a little bit hard to spot actually from the top of the wing, because it didn't actually do that much damage to the top of the leading edge. It's when you look at the bottom of the wing that you see all the damage that happened. So our working theory right now of what happened, based on what the airport management saw with where the deer was positioned, what a departing plane saw when they took off after we got off the runway, because they went ahead and did it anyway, was they saw a couple more doe on the left side of the runway at the wooded area there. So our working theory is that we got between the buck and his mates in the middle of the rutting season, and so he charged us and decided to headbutt us. By the way, they also found one of the antlers, they said around 600 feet down the runway. So we figure it probably got stuck in the wing a little bit and, got torn off. And so, and by the way, when we did land, we touched down and that deer was still alive. He was laying down with his head up and an eyeball hanging out. And I didn't even notice one of his antlers was missing, because it was, it's just that kind of a compressed situation. But it was a little gruesome, but he was still there and alive. He took 3 bullets, is what the game warden said, to put him down. So he was really amped up as well. You can go to the next slide here. So this is the damaged lower skin and wing rib removed from that. There was no damage to the spar. It didn't actually touch the spar itself. It only damaged the leading edge skin and the lower skin, and slightly bent one of the wing ribs. And there were 2 impact points on the previous picture. I forgot to mention that, where we believe his other antler also poked a tiny hole in that same damaged area there. If you could scroll down a little bit more, we finally got our new part. So this happened, as I said, right before Thanksgiving. We got this part from Piper last week. It took that long. So please don't damage any planes right now. Parts are really, really hard to get. And next slide. And this last slide is really just a picture of the wing all apart and waiting for the new parts to come in. I thought it was an interesting picture to, I don't get to see inside wings every day. So I'm happy to answer any questions, but that's, 30 seconds of my life in summary that felt like 30 days.
Hey, Ken, this is Chaz. Hey, thanks a lot. Very, very interesting. I apologize. I may have missed it at the beginning. So you're coming in on final, and now obviously the deer has antlers, so I'm assuming it was full grown, or did it kind of come out of the woods or into the final approach or landing area, and you didn't catch it till later, or was it just kind of masked or hidden in the grass?
Yeah, so it was definitely a buck. It was a 5-point buck. It had 5 points on it. It was about 150 pounds, according to the game warden. So very glad I did not actually hit that with the wing itself or the prop. I feel like that would have been a much worse accident. In fact, the NTSB said this was not an accident or an incident at all, by the way. because of the limited damage. But I feel if I'd have hit it with the wing, it would have probably come close to totaling the plane. If people may not have been seriously injured because of how heavy it was. And that taxiway center area there, the area between the taxiway is grass, but it's a ditch. So if we'd have gone into that, we would have flipped. But to answer your question about where the deer was, it was in between, or as near as I could tell, it was in between the taxiway and the runway. I'm not sure if it ran out of the woods on final, because I do my normal checks where I look for things, that might be on the runway or in the runway environment like deer. But I didn't see anything. And I don't know if it's, just I missed it this time, or if it was hidden in the grass, or if it ran out after the fact. But I only saw it when it had started moving towards me, when I touched down on the wheels.
I got certainly not bashful and ask the next one. So after this strike, the airplane continued to fly well. So there's no noticeable difference. I'm just so curious looking at that damage in the wing and the underside of the wing. And there's nothing that indicated control or airflow or anything like that.
Yeah, so it was at the leading edge of the wing, fairly far out towards the end. I think, I don't know that one of those pictures had it. It might have been a little bit hard to see in the presentation at the PDF mode, but it was probably 2/3 of the way out on the wing. So, but yeah, there was I did a normal pattern with a soft field landing, and, we weren't anywhere near max gross weight. I keep the fuel at half like we do with Zero Fox Mike. So we were pretty light. There were only 2 adults in the plane.
All right, great. So now I'm going to rotate the turret at Rick or Vicky, any of our CFIs, because I can't remember this. And my question is more about wing airflow over the wing or under the wing and the Bernoulli effect. And I'm just so curious. It's with a big hole like that, I would think it would be a significant impact to controlling the airplane. I feel like I've forgotten something from my private pilot days. So Rick.
Well, the wing produces a lot of lift all across its surface area, and what reminds me of is we had the leading edge of one of the T-41s impacted, and I remember Jim Spohr got a ferry permit to fly it back to Tipton and taped it up with some speed tape. And I asked him when he got back, did he notice any difference? And he's like, no, honestly, Rick, I couldn't tell a difference. But I think if you were to actually look at the performance over time of your fuel economy and stuff like that, you would notice a difference. And if you were really just trying to fly super trimmed up and hands off, you might notice it roll to the left or the right or yaw to the left or the right. But, obviously he was under a lot of stress and focused on flying the pattern. I don't think a subtle change in lift on one ring would have been noticeable to him. I think what we worry about is when you have things like icing, the entire leading edge or the entire wing can get covered in ice. And now you're not just impacting one small area. I know that hole looks pretty big, but it's not actually that big. If you have ice over the entire wing, well, now you really do have a problem. And also the weight of the wing and the change of the shape of the wing. If you think about this, most of the wing, he even said that the top edge of the wing, he couldn't even see any difference. So, I can understand why it wouldn't make that big of a difference.
All right, we're gonna move on just because we're running out of.
What airfield was this?
Let's mute that one. Hold on a second. Okay, we have one last question. Ken, what was the airfield that this was at?
And also,
1B9
were there
Mansfield,
any fire
Massachusetts.
or emergency services nearby?
Say that again, Ken.
Yeah, it was 1B9 in Mansfield Airport. And in fact, there is a trauma flight based right out of there, Helicopter One. So that was, somewhat comforting, that I knew those guys.
And then Mike, if there's any service in that field.
Frank, you were breaking up a bit, but I think you were asking about emergency services. And yeah, there's a trauma flight located on the field, a helicopter that flies for the local hospital. It's actually one of the businesses there. So that was a little bit comforting to know that, you know, if something did happen, those guys, they're staffed 24/7 there. So.
All right, so appreciate that, Ken. If anybody has any questions for Ken, you can reach out to him. He'll answer all your deer questions. Did you get the deer mounted, Ken?
No, they wouldn't let me have it.
They wouldn't let you have it. Okay. All right, so we're gonna move on. We're gonna do real quick. We got to do our security training for the year. So it's a mandatory. So we need to do this. I'm gonna hold on a second here. Can they still see him? Who's got Zoom going on right now? Here and here.
Let me in. Show you.
We can't see anything yet, Frank.
Okay. Can you still see me though, Ken?
We can see you.
Yeah, I'm not gonna share the screen. I just need
Okay.
to see if you
Yeah, we can see
still
you.
me. Okay. Can you still see me?
No.
Now we can.
Yeah, that's a problem. Okay.
Now we can, so don't touch anything.
Well, I'm gonna have to share the screen then on my side. Okay. Got it. So let me do this, share the screen, start the broadcast. Have some patience. Nah, I don't think so, because I'm gonna talk. I'm gonna have to talk. So I'm just hoping this thing will. This is unwieldy. Okay. Can you guys see the? All right. Can they hear me?
You're good, Frank.
All right. So, real quick again, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Excellent. All right. So we're doing our TSA security brief for the year. We're going to go through the 4 sections that the TSA has implemented as a alternate course for us. First thing we're going to do is section 1, which is our review information, any new security measures or procedures implemented by the flight school, the airport. Basically, nothing has changed recently, other than we did have new doors and windows installed in our hangar. They are changing that. They did change some locks in our building, which we have access to what we need to have access to, so that's still good. Same thing still goes as before. You don't let anybody in the airfield who isn't allowed on the airfield, or you don't know who they are. So if you're coming through the gate and somebody, said, hey, hold the gate for me. If you don't know who they are, be polite, but you can't let them in. That's, either coming through the car. If you have a pass for the car, you can't let people come in behind you. And at the gate, you can't let people come in that way either. Pretty straightforward. A couple of years ago, when we had the TSA do a seminar at the clubhouse, they came through the gate and people were trying to get in with them, and they wouldn't let them in. So it's kind of funny. Let's see. We have the entire airport has a fence. It's to keep people out. It's also to keep deer out, but that doesn't always happen. We have deer on the field. They do have a company that comes in at night and kills as many deer inside the fence that they can when it becomes a problem. So if you're out there one night and there's somebody shooting, don't be afraid. Unless they're shooting at you. On the weekends, we tend to have more transient visitors than on the weekdays. So if we have, just be aware of that. Most of the time, if they come in and they've landed their own plane, they're not going to be a security risk. It's the guy coming in from the outside. So let's, we haven't changed anything. We actually do need to add some, we probably need to add some locks to the 150s, which don't have throttle locks on them just yet. And I don't know, we'll have to talk about whether we need the lock on the Pipers, because the throttle locks don't work on the Pipers. We'd have to do something else. Okay. If you see something, it doesn't make sense to you, you can always call 911. The advantage that we have is our proximity to the place across the street that shall not be named. Okay. One of the reasons that the airport is there is because that place demanded that they have security access and basically control of the field. If you look at top of the FBO, there's this huge funky looking camera. Everything that's going on at the field is videotaped. Every plane that lands, every plane that takes off. It's pretty impressive on what they have. That's the advantage we have. If you call 911, somebody's going to come quickly to that field. So, we're not telling you to tackle anybody who looks suspicious, because most of us would be tackled by each other at some point. So, but if you see something that doesn't make sense, you need to, tell somebody about it. And if it's an emergency, call 911. If the airport's open and the FBO is open, you can go talk to them. Tell them, hey, there's something going on here. So that's, and I've actually done that. I had somebody came in, I pulled the car through the gate, was waiting for the gate to close, and the guy came walking and ran through. And I'm like, what the hell are you doing? And the manager was there, and we stopped the guy, and the guy was a tenant, and he just said he just was walking in. So that's something that we need to do. All right, discuss any security incidents at the flight school or airport, any lessons learned. We haven't had any security incidents with the club. Sue, I don't think we've had anything. The only incident we had recently is somebody went to the fuel depot and got 2 plastic bottles of fuel filled up. You can't fuel plastic bottles at Tipton. It's against the rules. And the guy did it, and no one knew who he was. So there was a big thing. His picture went out to all the tenants like that. And basically, who is this guy? And it turned out to be a student, it was one of the guys with the flight school next to us. So, like I said, it's, they do pay attention, and they do have video of everything that's going on. So just assume you're on video when you're at the field. Just a reminder, we also have the video in the office. We have cameras up in the office. They're not recording, but they are there. They do tend to be, I think they're set to record in the nighttime in case people coming in and out, because more likely that's when somebody might try to sneak in and do something that we don't want them to do. So if you're in the clubhouse, you might be on video at that time as well. Anything else? Anybody have any other things on incidents at the airport or at the clubhouse, security wise?
I have a
All right.
question.
Yeah.
So, like, what to do in case of exiting the fence? Recently, when I was entering, there was a lady on inside the fence, like kind of trying to get the code or something from the phone. I don't know. It happened to me once. I had like total brain lock when I got inside, but getting out, I totally forgot that I had to search my email for this code. But if like you try to enter and someone wants to exit, but that obviously doesn't have code at the moment, what should you do?
I got no problems with you letting them out. The bigger problem is letting them in.
No,
I
I
mean,
understand about in, but for out, if person doesn't look suspicious and just just want to get out, but like looks like doesn't have the code or don't remember, just let it go.
My suggestion would be is you can let them out. When you come in, they're gonna probably go out anyway. I wouldn't have any kind of, but if you're concerned, then you let the FBO know. They will have a video of that person. So if they think there's a concern, they can find out where that person has been from the point that you let them out to wherever they were on the airport. So if you think that's an issue, let us know or let the FBO know, and they will take a look at the security footage to see what that person was doing. Does that make sense?
Now, the other case I'll give you is if a pilot shows up after hours and they've clearly flown in and they're trying to get out of the airport, I think it's fair to direct them to the part of the FBO building where they can find the code to get out, and if they clearly are a pilot that have landed at the airport.
That's a great point. So what the point is transient pilots who land at Tipton should not be using our gate to exit and enter. They should be using the gate at the FBO, which is what's meant for them, and the code is there for them to get in and out. So if you do have a transient that shows up and wants you to let him out, point him to the FBO and say you got to go out that way. That's a very good point, Rick. All right. Any new threats posed by or incidents involving general aviation aircraft contained on the TSA website? They go into, as all the CFIs know, we have the thing with the citizenship. Make sure you're doing that. If you are doing aliens, you need to do even more. We're all aware of that. So if you are doing that, we need to make sure you're on top of that. Theft. There has been 2 thefts in Virginia, I think in the last week or so. And what did they steal? They stole Garmin 430 WASs out of planes. Yes, sir.
Right, I was gonna say, actually just on the way up here, listening to News Talk or whatever, they're talking about a pretty big increase across South Carolina and North Carolina as well in terms of theft of Garmin.
So there, it seems to be a big theft on the Garmin units.
That's one of the pilots from the glider club. He just walked somewhere and
Yep.
overnight.
I think Manassas had there was a theft in Manassas, and then there was another airport in Virginia. And Front Royal. The avionics guy that we talked to today says one of these used 430 WASs is like $8,000 to $10,000 a pop.
That was 650, the one they stole from.
And that was a GTN 650, which is probably even more expensive. So what does that mean? At Tipton, yes, I think we're more secure than a lot of other places. If we are using the planes to go other airports, you're going to have to be cognizant of this, and lock them if we can lock them. I know right now the Aero isn't lockable, so we might have to look into getting that corrected. But it's something that you got to be concerned about, because it's going to ruin your day if you show up and they've torn apart. These planes, they broke in the doors, and then they didn't gently take these things out. They tend to not be very good. So now you got a plane that can't even fly at the moment.
Yeah, that Cardinal, they created the door and they messed up the door and everything.
Yeah. So that's something that's going on. Suspicious activity at general aviation airports. We sort of talked about that.
We take it, like, say we take the plane to Ocean City and the Garmin gets stolen in Ocean City. Who's liable?
Well, we have insurance to cover that. I mean, we're probably not going to blame it on you unless you're the one that stole it. You have a suspicious kind of character. No, I mean, unless you leave everything open and a sign that says "Come steal me," I don't think the club is going to hold you responsible for getting a Garmin stolen, especially if they break open the door. And I mean, it's a criminal act. If it's a criminal act, it's we'll put it through insurance. So I wouldn't be too worried about that. This shows you how often they update this thing. It's still got the ATIS in there. Everybody should be very familiar with the SFRA and the FRZ now. If you're not, just resign and because it's not worth it anymore. Any new TSA guidelines? They actually did come out with a new guideline, which is incredibly long. So we will not get into it that detailed, but I did want to bring it up. It's a couple of years old, but there's a couple things in here I wanted to go over. The thing it goes through, you know, what the airport's supposed to be doing and what we're supposed to be doing and what CFIs are supposed to be doing. Just real quick, it even talks about what type of fencing to have and things like that, which we're not going to deal with. All right, so everybody should be familiar with the GA Secure Airport Watch program. The AOPA is with that, and you know, again, it stresses, you see something, say something, you know, don't just ignore things. Security awareness, following are some of the recommended things: aircraft with unusual and unauthorized modifications. You see a 50 caliber gun mounted on it, say something. Persons loitering for extended periods around. We shouldn't. Now, here's something. The airport is very good when strange people will be milling around. They usually tell us that there's going to be strangers coming around and walking around because, you know, they don't want an issue. So, but again, if there's any question, say something to the FBO if they're open, and they'll take care of it. You know, that's their job. And if it's nighttime and you're that concerned about it, you can call 911 and they'll either the people across the street will send over security or the police will come and deal with that. Pilots who appear to be under the control of another person. Kind of defines student pilots, but they're okay. If it's something different, it's, you know.
I thought you were going to say it defines a husband.
Or defines a husband. That is true. Anybody, I mean, we don't rent aircraft to non-members, so that's not a big issue with us. Valid credentials. We have not gotten to the point where we're all having to wear badges. Is that something that could be in the future? Who knows? There are airports, GA airports, and some of us have been there, that the security is very high. It's, you know, it's extremely high. It's, you know, you can't get in and out without being buzzed in and out personally. So there's a lot of, you know, that could change if this airport becomes bigger, which it is planning on becoming bigger. I mean, they do have a plan on extending this runway. And if they extend the runway, and they have plans for a new terminal building. Whether that happens in terms of money or not, we'll see what happens. Let's see. Any pilot who makes threats or statements inconsistent with normal uses of aircraft. Pretty self-explanatory. You know, it's mostly common sense. You know, you see a guy with an AK-47, talk, you know, say something, stuff like that. In terms of us with our students and our pilots, we're a little, before the changeover, we were very, you know, discriminatory on who we took in. And now we're a little more open to the, you know, general public, but we're still vetting like we should be for the most part. So, all right. Sue, you got anything? Come on up. Let me get you back on the old Zoom.
Okay, I just have a few things because we're running a little bit longer than we'd normally like. After your flight, walk around the airplane and check it. Make sure that the fuel caps aren't left open. And the tie downs, as we already had talked about, make sure the tie downs are tight. Just take that extra minute. And also when I get down from a flight, I mean, I look under the seats, look all the way in the back. I check the pockets because there's all kinds of stuff that you didn't do, but somebody else might have left there. So please just try and keep the planes nice, and don't worry if you weren't the one to do it, please pick it up. Let's see. What was it? The comments in the FSP. We ask you to do that because quite often, if a plane goes down for maintenance or something, we're looking to see where we can put you and what you wanted to do. If somebody's going to $100 hamburger and taking people with them, they need probably 781 or 782. So they had 71 from the 72 if we can. If you work at Easton and we need something from the Eastern Shore, we might say, could you drop into Easton or Bay Bridge and just pick something up for us and bring it back? That's why I kind of want to know what you're doing and where you're going. So if you would put that in there, and the things I really want to know, if your instructor like Rick Niles, where you don't have, or no, Rick has one, like Frank that doesn't have a line, tell me who your instructor is. If you're flying with somebody with a line, I can just look over and see who it is because it says dual. But tell me where you're going and what you want to do. If you look, when you hover over, it'll show your name and it'll show a phone number normally, if that's what the phone number is that you want to be contacted. Some people put their home phone, but I kind of need your cell phone to be able to contact you. So again, as it was said earlier by John, check the tie downs when you're there. If you're walking by an airplane and it's not the airplane you're flying, but you see the tie downs aren't right, please fix them. Last thing, I noticed the other day that one of the cowling plugs was melted. So I think what somebody did was jam the hose with the cowling plug, and then it got hot and melted the fabric on the cowling plug. So if you would, don't put them up right against the cowling plug. The hose should go on one side and the cowling plug on the other side, so the hot air doesn't go, go in and come right back out. But try to get it in there so it doesn't have to be held by the cowling plug. Or if you do, make sure it doesn't get hot enough to melt the plugs. Does anybody have any questions for me? Okay, thanks.
All right, and one last thing on that. If you're going to put in oil in the plane, put in the full quart. If it needs oil, it needs at least a quart. Let's try not to use a portion of the quart, because you find bottles in the back that have a third left in the bottle. So if you got to put oil in, it's got to be the quart. So put the whole quart in there.
Frank, sometimes we just get thirsty.
Fair enough, Rick. Fair enough. If you're drinking the oil, just take it with you. All right, that's it for tonight. I will send out an email and we'll post the next assignment for the next quarter. If no one's got any questions, we went a little over. I appreciate everybody's patience. This is brand new with doing a live and a Zoom. I think it could go much better than it went, but we'll work on that and see if we can do better in June. All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
PSA applies for the CFI?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, that's why we did it.